Hi. So I thought that I would share with you why I keep the Sabbath and how I keep the Sabbath, because I keep the Sabbath best I can. Um, One of my friends today asked me why I do what I do on the Sabbath, and so I briefly shared with him, and then I was like, well, I should probably like make a video because I'm not a good writer, and so I came home, no one's home, everyone's at the beach, and I thought, well, I should just do that. So I have the Bible, and I have you right here. So if you'll bear with me for a couple verses, then you'll learn about the Sabbath, at least the reasons why I keep the Sabbath and why I keep them differently than most people that keep the Sabbath do. But first of all, please pray with me as we begin. Father, I want to honor you, and I want to honor you with my life and with my words. May I speak clearly the things that are on my heart, and the things that you show me in your word. Be with the person watching right now. Help them to understand my thoughts clearly and your word even more clearly. Amen. Gotta pray. Gotta pray. I don't want to give you my words, but God's words. So a good place to start is Exodus 20. Exodus 20. That's where you've got the Ten Commandments written down. They're recorded there in Exodus chapter 20. This is, it comes right after Jesus, God, you know, God gave the Ten Commandments right after the children of Israel had come out of slavery in Egypt. So they had come over through the Red Sea, and they came into the wilderness on the other side. They were finally free from their oppressors. For 400 years, generations had been slaves in Egypt, and now they were free. So this generation that came out, they had no idea what freedom was and what it was like, and all they knew was paganism that was surrounding them. And so then here in Exodus, which is the second book of the Bible, chapter 20, it begins with this. And God spoke all these words, saying, verse 2, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then he gives the commandments. Now, keeping the commandments is not legalism. You can keep the commandments in a legalistic way, but keeping them in and of itself is not legalism. Legalism is when you do something so that way you will earn salvation, or you will you will do something to merit God's favor. But the problem with that is that God's favor is free. God already loves you. He loved you so much, and he loves Jesus. Jesus explains this later. Loves Jesus even more. How does God love Jesus even more? But he does. He did after what Jesus did for us. Because he loves us so much, it made him love Jesus more. That's crazy. That's another video for another time. But he loved us so much that he brought the children of Israel out of slavery. When we're born into slavery to sin. It's reality, and we are born into this. Then when we are taken out of that, and notice what he says here. He says, I am the Lord your God. He doesn't say, I have become, I am whatever. He says, I am the Lord your God, who, and then he tells who he is in connection to that, who brought you, past tense, brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then he says, you shall have no other gods before me. If they had no other gods before them, if they didn't worship idols and didn't, all of these commandments, if they didn't do these things so that God would bring them out of slavery, that would be correct legalism, I guess. And they'd have a reason to be legalistic about keeping these things. But God says, I am the God, I am your God, and I've already brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, keep my commandments. And so then he lists all of his commandments. So when we keep the commandments of God, it's not so he will bring us out of sin and out of slavery and that he'll be our God. He's already our God. He already saved us from our sins. And so we keep these commandments as a response to God and in response to who he is to us and in response to who we've become now free in Christ. So, yeah, I like that. So, Exodus 20, and it goes through. It says, you shall have no other gods before me, commandment 1. 2, you shall not make for yourself any carved image of any likeness of anything in the heavens above, blah, 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 to bow down to them, blah, 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 blah. And third commandment, you shall not, verse 7, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, which means a number of things. That's a whole other video. And then the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. So right there, the way it begins is remember. All the commandments say, you shall not, you shall not, you shall not. And then the fourth and fifth are different. The fourth says, remember the Sabbath day. Why does he say remember? You know why he says remember? Because it's so easy to forget. We're going through our week, we're busy, we're working, we got our social stuff going on, we have our career stuff going on, we have our school stuff going on, we have our family stuff going on, and it's so easy to forget. But he says, remember. That is a commandment. So remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now, holy means not something that glows, okay? If something is holy, they don't glow, like, oh, you know, like that. We think they're related, but, you know, holy means something separate. So to keep the day holy is by keeping it separate. We are to be a holy nation, a royal priesthood, right? We're to be separate, a people separate than the rest of the world. We're among them, but we're different. So this day, the Sabbath day, is to be different than all the other days. Verse 9. 6 days, so it's starting to explain this. So it gives the introduction, and then it begins going into this. 6 days you shall labor, do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. So, 6 days we have to do all our work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. So it's God's Sabbath. The seventh day is God's Sabbath, is God's day. In it you shall not work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle. If you got cows, don't make them work. Nor your stranger who is within your gates. So no one's to do work. I mean, it's pretty inclusive. Anyone under your authority, you can't make them work for you. The Sabbath is this great equalizer that the master and the servant, the employer and the employee, the teacher and the student, the professor and the student, you know, all are leveled. Like, there is no distinction now on the seventh day Sabbath between these things that have been created by man. Oh, that person's more important than I am, you know. But on the Sabbath day, no one can make someone else do work. And so these people were slaves, and so they're coming out of Egypt with this mentality that there is a hierarchy of people, and some people are more important than others. But this law that obviously comes from God. I mean, what human would make this law? Humans want to be more powerful, but they're saying no, it's the same. No, the master can't make the female or male servants or their sons or daughters or anyone work on that day. Everyone is to rest on that day because it's God's day. It's not your day, it's God's day. And you can take what I just said and like twist it and make it all whatever by Matthew, but we'll hit that later. Okay, so try and hear what I'm thinking, not what I'm saying. I mean, hear what I'm saying, but know what I'm thinking. So, and then it gives a reason. This is why no one should work on that day, and you shouldn't make somebody else work. For in 6 days the Lord your God made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So he made it holy. So why do we keep the seventh day Sabbath? It's because that's the day that God rested on, and that's the day that he made holy. So it's like, oh, okay, because he's creator, that he's our creator God. And then it goes in the fifth commandment, which is a whole other video if I wanted to make something like that. Actually, I do want to make one. So let's go back to creation then, shall we? Genesis, the first book of the Bible, because it talked about why? Because he made in 6 days and then he rested on the seventh. So Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. So this is after the first creation account. It says, thus the heavens and the earth, this is Genesis chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the hosts of them were finished. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then, verse 3, then God blessed the seventh day. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. He made it holy, sanctified, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. And so God did this at the very beginning. This chapter 3 is when sin came in. So this was even before sin. This was right after he had created the earth. He had formed man and created everything, and everything for man to be in, and then he rested. And Shabbat means to cease, means to rest, to stop. So he stopped. He knew we would need to stop. We're limited. He's not. Was God like, phew, I'm tired? He wasn't like that. He was fine with it. He doesn't run out of energy, but we do. And he gave the Sabbath to us, and because he rested on the seventh day, and so he wants us to also. So that's fine and dandy. And the reason why, and that is creation. The Ten Commandments are also recorded again in another spot in Deuteronomy, the fourth book of the Bible. Oh, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Oh, fifth book. Sorry, I should pay more attention to what I'm doing. Deuteronomy 5. Deuteronomy 5. 12. 5:12. Deuteronomy 5:12. It says, observe the Sabbath day. What version am I using? This is a New King James Version. You might have a different one. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son nor your daughter, nor your male servant nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, or any of your cattle, nor the stranger that is within your gates, that your male servant and female servant may rest as well as you. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So here we have another version of the Ten Commandments. And this reason, the reason here it says, because you, the end of 14 it says, that, so nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor your that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. And remember that you were a slave, and that God brought you out. And therefore he commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So if you haven't been brought out of sin, you don't need to keep the commandments. Oh, sorry, okay, that was not necessary. So that the Deuteronomy, there are two versions of it here, and I've heard other people. I guess I'll deal with that another. I should do a commandment one for all the commandments. Just talking with you, just sharing the things that I've learned from the Bible. So it's pretty interesting, yeah? So the Sabbath is something very special to God. It's a day that he set up at creation, the beginning of the earth. And does it continue? Well, it continued from the beginning all the way up until Moses' day and the children of Israel. And he's giving them his people, the special people on earth that are called with his name, which is really significant. And then here, hundreds of years later, thousands, I suppose, right? Yeah. He's commanding them to continue keeping the Sabbath day. So this is something that that is in perpetuity from the beginning. And how to keep it is in there. Oh, okay. Do I do that now or later? So Exodus 20 is where the commandments are, the first set. Exodus 20, and so E20, and then I use little mind tricks to remember things. So then Ezekiel 20, let's go there, Ezekiel 20, that's much later. And he brings it up again, like a refresher. And he does it a lot throughout in between, but these are like significant points. Yeah. Rebellions of Israel. This is something that you'll need to read. I'm not going to read it all on here because we're already 17 minutes. Okay. So he's talking about the idols that they did and how he's reminding them of all the things that he did when he brought them out of Egypt. And then verse 12. So he's talking about all these different things that he did and their abominations that they were doing in Egypt and And then he goes, moreover, verse 12, I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between them and me, that they may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. So he's contrasting this. He introduces this chapter with all these idols and all this stuff that they're going to that they think are God. But then he introduces Sabbaths to them to remind them that he is, that they might know that I am the Lord, not me, God, that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. Yet the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes. They despised my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. He shall live by them. And they greatly defiled my Sabbaths. Then I said I would pour out my fury on them in the wilderness to consume them. But I acted for my name's sake, that it shall not be profaned before the Gentiles, in whose sight I have brought them out. So even the pagans outside, they saw that God's hand and his name was there. So he brought them in a land flowing milk and honey, and then in the glory of all lands, verse 16, because they despised my judgments and did not walk in my statutes, but profaned my Sabbaths, which is the sign between them, the covenant, for their heart went after their idols. Nevertheless, my eye spared them, and he continues on. And he's continually talking, verse 19, I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes, keep my judgments, and do them. Hallow my Sabbaths, and they will be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. Notwithstanding, the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes. And he goes on. So, this is not the story of my life. Just keep, oh yeah, God, I'll do your commandments, I'll do your commandments. Oh, and go off like that. Remember, it's a sign. He's saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. This is Exodus 20, verse 1. I brought you out of Egypt. And then he gives the commandments. I've already saved you. Here's my commandments. And then it's a sign between me and you. Do my judgments. Keep my commandments. And then Israel's like, no. And then they just keep not doing that. Isaiah 58. Where is Isaiah? I'll use my Bible trick. So this is a Bible trick. If you want to find Isaiah really quick, then you do half. Oh, Isaiah. Perfect. Oh, right here. 48. Isaiah 48. Oh, is it 58? I think it's 58. Anyway. So half is falls in Isaiah or Psalms, something like that, unless you have a thick concordance in the back. I had a teacher that taught me that, a professor. Yeah, 58. Isaiah 58. So Isaiah 58 says, so he's talking about these people that are fasting. They're God's people by his name, but they're just not doing anything. And they're like, oh, we fast, we don't eat, and we afflict our bodies, and we're trying to, be holy and stuff like that, but you're not listening. And he's like, well, yeah, because you're doing this so you can be seen by men, and the attitude's all messed up. And he goes on to say, and then, and he's talking about the attitude that they have while they do this holy thing. And he's like, well, I don't even care about your fasting then. And then he starts talking, because they're, so if you do, if while you're fasting you actually give your food to the poor, and where is it? Verse 10. If you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. All these blessings. And you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in. So he's like, then do these things. Don't just stop eating. Actually do something and help other people, which is a principle also in the Sabbath. You've got people that say, oh, then I won't do any work. And then they sleep all day, or they just lay in bed lethargically all day. That's not keeping the Sabbath either. The Sabbath is about stopping the normal work, but it's doing the work of God, which goes into the Matthew 12 thing. And then verse 13 of Isaiah 58:13. If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, not this burdensome thing that you have to do because God told you to. What kind of attitude is that? The holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. And then it goes on to talk about, after that. You read it. You read the Bible for yourself. Don't take my masticated scripture. Actually do it. Eat it for yourself. So he's saying, if you make the Sabbath a delight, that it's the Lord's day, and it becomes your delight, then that's keeping the Sabbath. It's not saying, oh, there's these laws, I have to do, and because this is the commandments that he gave. And the same thing for fasting. Okay. I've hammered that enough. So Matthew, just double checking to make sure it's the right one. Yeah, Matthew 12. Jesus and the disciples are walking through the grain field, and it's on the Sabbath day, and they're hungry, and so they're just grabbing the grain as they're eating, and they're popping the kernels. They're pulling apart the what's it called on the outside, the shell, the whatever, pulling it back and popping the kernels into their mouth as they're walking, because they're hungry. They're snacking on the Sabbath. And then the Pharisees, which made the rule, God didn't make the rule. I mean, have we hit it so far that you're not supposed to eat or whatever on the Sabbath? It ain't there. So the Pharisees are like, oh, it's not lawful to harvest wheat on the Sabbath. Yeah, you don't be harvesting wheat. That's, don't harvest wheat, but you're just pulling pieces off the ground. They had a rule that you can't spit on Sabbath, because if you spit, then it might water a plant, and therefore you're irrigating on the Sabbath. That's not what they're doing. The disciples are walking there. They're hungry, and they began to pluck heads of the grain and eat it. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath." And then Jesus said, verse 3, "Have you not read?" Oh, and then he gives an example from the Old Testament about how David went into the house of God and ate the showbread, which is so not lawful for him to do, but it was fine. Or don't you know that the priests in the temple, that they profane the Sabbath by doing work more than anybody? I'm a pastor. I do more work than anybody on the Sabbath, but I'm not breaking the Sabbath by doing work. I mean, that's one of my busiest days, because I'm seeing everybody that I haven't, been able to catch up with, and all this stuff. I'm working really hard. When you're preaching, it is so, like sweat. I started carrying a handkerchief. It's just like pouring, and your brain's racing, and you see people out there. Hey, so-and-so's at church, but you don't say it, you think it, and your brain's working on like 3 tiers. Anyway, that's blah, blah, blah. I love being pastor. So I'm working super hard on the Sabbath, but I'm not breaking the Sabbath, because I'm ministering, I'm doing, and he says, but if you had known what this means, and he quotes the Old Testament, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice," you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And then later on it gives another example of a Sabbath healing on the Sabbath. And then he says, man was not made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for man. I'm anyway, trying to move fast so you keep your attention. So, read it for yourself. So the principle of keeping the Sabbath is that you're not a slave to the Sabbath, but the Sabbath is made for you, so you can rest. Don't make all these little rules outside of God's rule of keeping the Sabbath. Don't do your work. Don't check your work emails on Sabbath. Don't be worrying about what's going on at the office if it's stuff still going on. This is your day. This day is the day that God has set aside for you, the 7th day of the week, so that way you can rest apart from Him. I mean, rest in Him and apart from the rest of the stuff during the week. 6 days you have. 6 days. But the 7th is God's. And He's giving it to you to rest from this other stuff. And it makes everyone the same. It's the great equalizer. Just like the grave is the great equalizer, so is the Sabbath when kept. And it's honestly something you do in faith. That you say, I will not work, I will not do my work, the things that I need to do in order to survive on that day, because God has told me not to, and I'm going to not do these things in faith. So if you're really hard, if you could get ahead a bit more by working on Sabbath, you not doing that is honoring God because He's told you not to, and you're saying you'll take care of me. I'm not the one that takes care of me. God takes care of me. It's the same thing with tithing. When you give God 10% of what you receive, if your increase, this is honoring God with your money. So Sabbath honors God with your time, and tithing honors God with your money. And you're saying, God, I know things are tight, but I'm going to trust you because you've asked me, Malachi 3:10, that you've asked me for this amount back. I'm going to give it to you, and I know that you'll bless the rest. I'm going to give you this one day a week, which is the seventh day that you've set aside. Some people, they don't think there's a difference, but the Bible clearly makes a difference. And as you read through those texts, you can see that. So I won't hammer that in. So the Sabbath is that time that I'm going to give God, and I have 6 days to work and get everything done. If I don't get it done, I'm going to enjoy the day that the Lord has given me to enjoy and relax, and to spend time with Him. It's a date. And then with tithing, I've got 90% of my increase that I can live off of, play off of, whatever, feed my kids off of, pay my school, my bills, whatever. But this 10% God has asked for, I'm going to give it back to Him in faith. And that's why you give it at the beginning, and not at the end, after you've paid your bills and everything. And then it's no longer faith because, oh, I have enough money, then I'll pay God. You pay it at the beginning, and you say, I know that you will trust, I trust you with the rest of my money. That's another tangent. I love tangents, I guess. I'm a tangent theologian. So there's this story in the Old Testament, right after the Ten Commandments were given. They found this guy collecting sticks on the Sabbath, right? I don't know where the verse is. You'll have to look it up. You've got the internet. And so this guy's collecting sticks on the Sabbath, and they bring him to Moses, and they're like, we found this guy collecting sticks on the Sabbath. What do we do? Because obviously that's breaking the commandment. And they got the elders, they talked to, and God said, kill him. So they stoned him, and they killed the guy for collecting sticks. And that's pretty harsh. That's pretty messed up. I mean, I break the Sabbath. I don't intentionally do it. I do stuff. Like sometimes you find yourself in a situation like, oh, and then I broke the Sabbath. Like I was at a mall one time, and the sun went down on Friday, and it was Black Friday, and I was shopping, and the mall was, no windows or anything, and I was in the mall on Sabbath, and it was like, I was totally doing my own thing on the Sabbath. That had nothing to do with God whatsoever. I got a good jacket though, and so this dude's collecting sticks, and then he gets killed for it. And I thought that was pretty messed up until someone kind of pointed out a few things to me. They're like, think about this. They're in the wilderness, okay? So this guy's collecting sticks in the wilderness. Are they in a jungle, or are they in a forest where there's like lots of trees and stuff? Oh no. He's collecting sticks, which is pretty rare, on the Sabbath when everyone else is supposed to be resting. He's collecting a precious commodity to bake his bread on when everyone else is baking their bread on cow dung, stuff like that. And then he's going to bake it on this nice, wood. This is a precious limited resource that he's trying to get ahead of the rest of the community by going out on Sabbath and collecting something that. So he's not just going against God. He's going against the community. He's trying to get ahead by violating the law that God has set of everyone else. He's trying to get that edge by working on the Sabbath day. And so, yeah, he wants to be part of this community, but yet he doesn't want to abide by the rules that God himself thundered from the mountaintop and wrote with his own finger. You know, like, dude, there's other issues going on in this story, is what I'm trying to just say. There's other issues in this story that we thousands of years later read and go, oh, that's not cool. That doesn't jive with me. But we're missing some stuff. Think about the culture. Think about the situation they're in the wilderness, gathering sticks on the Sabbath day, right after it was given. It wasn't like it was like years later and he forgot, and you know, he really needed to build a fire because it was cold. They're in the desert. It's not that cold. Things like that. So just some other things to think about with that. So, when you keep the Sabbath, my point. When you keep the Sabbath, you don't. You're not doing it. You're intentionally saying, I'm not trying to get ahead in this world where everything is about getting ahead. If you're not working, if you're not studying on the every day of the week, then yeah, enjoy your D in your class, or enjoy not your entry-level position for all of your life, because you're not going to be getting ahead. But then there's so many testimonies about people that keep the Sabbath and in really hard conditions. I mean, even during like Nazi Revolution and stuff, there were Adventists that kept the Sabbath faithfully during that time. The book 1,000 Shall Fall. Oh, it's such a good book. You've got to read that book. It's so good. But there's so many other stories too. It's such a good book. So where was I? So I better wrap this up. So we've got, you've got the Colossians text, but that's read Colossians, that text, the 13 text, and then read Ezekiel 45. Go deep. Pray before, okay, all right. Try and see what they're really saying, and not what thousands of years later we're trying to impose on the text. Okay. Yay! Revelation 14. Yeah. So the Sabbath was given. I love the Sabbath because of its connectedness to all throughout Scripture. I'm just scratching the surface here in the 37 minutes. I must have become a pastor somewhere along the way, because I can talk for 37 minutes on and on. Revelation 14, verse 6. This is the proclamation of the three angels. This is this judgment proclamation that is coming out to the whole world, represented by these three angels. Excuse me. Verse 6, it says, potluck. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and the earth, the sea, and the springs of water. Worship him who made. Here in the last book of the Bible, it's referring to the first. And everything in between. It's talking about worshiping God, who is the creator, who made the heaven, who made the earth, who made the sea, who made us. And the Sabbath in Exodus 20, in Deuteronomy 5, in Genesis 2, in Ezekiel, what was it? Ezekiel 20? Yeah, Exodus 20, Ezekiel 20. In these verses, he is the one who made us. He's the one that redeemed us, the one that saved us. He's the one that brought us out of slavery and bondage to sin and the things of this world. We're called to be a separate people and called by his name. And to be resting on the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, is it keeps it's us acknowledging the authority of God, that He is creator and that He is the one that is worthy of worship. And so when we worship on His holy day, then we are honoring Him. When all the world does everything else, we worship the Creator. And so that's why I keep the Sabbath. I keep it because it acknowledges God as my Creator. I am His Son, redeemed by Jesus, brought out of the house of bondage. And so I keep it as a response. It's the fruit of the seed that's been planted in me. I keep it not because I'm fearful of Him not giving me salvation if I don't. It's because I'm in a relationship with Him. And this is the time that I have set aside in my life because He's asked me to, for Him, to spend with Him. And so when other stuff comes up, I put Him first. And it's hard at times. Even as a pastor, there are things that, family, if they don't have the same understanding as you, and they're asking you to do stuff on Sabbath, you have to say, is this something that I can go with God? Is this honoring Him? A family reunion? Family is super important to God. The next commandment after the Sabbath, the fourth one, is the fifth one, honoring your parents. Yeah, great. But am I gonna do karaoke and all this stuff, with them? My family doesn't do karaoke. I just heard that from a friend. Would I do that stuff? No, because it's not on it. Am I gonna have a worship with my family? Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna spend that time with them. A wedding is a wedding something that I can attend on Sabbath, because it's marriage is holy. It's something incredible. It's instituted by God. There are two things in Eden. It's marriage and the Sabbath. And so this is honoring God. So would I go? Yeah. Am I gonna stay for the drunken dancing festivities afterwards? Probably not. So it's like, I'm gonna spend time with God, and I'm gonna do it the best I can. Maybe I'll do another video, part 2, how I keep the Sabbath. So this is why I keep the Sabbath. Verse 2. Chapter part 2 will be how I keep the Sabbath. I'm sharing. I'm giving you why my reasons and everything, so you can talk with me.